Hey guys! Tonight, we begin with the quiet, grimy, and oddly fascinating world of medieval hygiene. The truth behind every muddy village and crumbling castle, a world where noble women, beggars, and knights all lived with dirt beneath their nails and secrets beneath their skin. It wasn't just a time of knights and dragons. It was a world where filth and beauty, silence and disease, faith and fear all coexisted beneath a sky veiled in soot and stars. So, before you get too comfortable, go ahead and like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy these strange, sleepy corners of history. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. I love seeing who's joining us, night after night, from every corner of the world. Now, take a deep breath. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan or some soft white noise in the background. And let's drift into the past, together. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. In the modern world, bathing is synonymous with cleanliness, health, and well-being. We embrace hot showers and relaxing baths as essential rituals of hygiene and comfort, instinctively understanding their role in preventing disease and promoting good health. Yet, for vast stretches of history, particularly after the decline of Roman bath culture and throughout much of the medieval and early modern periods in Europe, the act of regular, full-body washing, especially with warm water, was often viewed not as a preventative measure, but as a perilous invitation to illness. The stark and deeply rooted belief was that people believed bathing opened the body to disease, leading to a widespread aversion to frequent washing. This conviction stemmed from a complex interplay of rudimentary medical theories, pervasive spiritual beliefs, and a profound misunderstanding of anatomy and contagion, ultimately shaping daily hygiene practices in ways that seem utterly counterintuitive to us today. The core of this counterintuitive belief lay in the dominant medical understanding of the time, particularly the widely accepted humoral theory and the concept of pores. According to humoral theory, the human body was a delicate balance of four fundamental fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, and health depended on maintaining their equilibrium. The skin, in this view, was not merely a protective barrier but a porous membrane, constantly interacting with the external environment. These tiny, invisible openings, the pores, were believed to be critical for the expulsion of harmful vapors, noxious humors, and other impurities from within the body, a vital process for maintaining internal balance. When a person became ill, it was often thought to be due to an imbalance of these humors or the retention of harmful bodily effluvia. This understanding directly informed the apprehensions surrounding bathing, particularly with warm water. The prevailing belief was that warm water would cause the body's pores to open excessively, dilating them beyond their natural protective state. While superficially seeming beneficial for cleansing, this opening was seen as a dangerous vulnerability. It was feared that these expanded pores would then act as unguarded gateways, allowing harmful external elements to penetrate the body's interior. Foremost among these dreaded elements was bad air, or miasma. Miasma theory, which dominated medical thought for centuries, posited that diseases were caused by noxious fumes, corrupted air, or foul-smelling emanations rising from decaying matter, stagnant water, or unhygienic environments. If pores were opened by warm water, it was believed this invisible, disease-carrying bad air could easily enter the bloodstream, directly corrupting the humors and leading to illness, fever, or even death. The very air, especially in crowded, unsanitary medieval cities, was considered a vector of sickness, and therefore, exposing oneself to it through open pores was an act of profound self-endangerment. Beyond the threat of miasma, the belief often extended to more spiritual concerns. In a profoundly religious and superstitious age, where illness and misfortune were frequently attributed to unseen forces, it was also feared that opening the pores could let evil spirits enter the body. Demons, malevolent spirits, or the insidious influence of witches were believed to actively seek entry points into the human vessel to cause affliction, temptation, or outright possession. The dilated pores, unprotected by their usual natural constriction, were perceived as unguarded portals. A soothing bath could thus become a terrifying ritual, potentially inviting spiritual contamination alongside physical illness. This fear imbued the act of washing with a dangerous, almost sacred significance, turning what we consider mundane into a perilous spiritual gamble. This pervasive belief led to a profound shift in hygiene practices, away from full-body immersion and towards dry cleaning. Rather than bathing, individuals would often rely on dry rubbing, using cloths to wipe away visible dirt. Clothes, even if rarely washed, were seen as a primary barrier against the elements and bad air, and their layers were thought to protect the pores. Scented oils, perfumes, and pomanders, small containers filled with aromatic substances, were widely used not to mask body odor, though that was a side effect, but primarily to purify the air around the person, creating a protective aromatic shield against miasma. The focus was on external appearance and olfactory defense rather than deep cleansing. People believed that a healthy, functioning body expelled its own impurities, and therefore, interfering with the skin's natural breathing by opening pores with warm water was seen as disruptive and dangerous. The decline of the Roman Empire's extensive public bathhouses also contributed to this shift. As infrastructure crumbled and Christian doctrine increasingly associated public bathing with pagan excess and sexual immorality, the practice fell out of favor. While some localized bathhouses might have persisted, the cultural emphasis shifted, viewing too much exposure, too much heat, and too much collective nakedness as spiritually and physically dangerous. These beliefs profoundly shaped their daily existence. An assassin, for instance, whose life was already precarious, faced extreme challenges due to these deeply ingrained convictions. They risked dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk exacerbated by unsanitary living conditions and limited understanding of hygiene. Their grim work was often further complicated by superstitions, with beliefs in curses, witches, and omens like a black cat crossing their path. Their employers were untrustworthy, often orchestrating their demise after a kill to cover tracks, ensuring they rarely got paid fully. Medieval cities were death traps, full of tight alleys, watchful guards, and nosy drunks. Hiding bodies was almost impossible, with no clean-up crews or chemicals. Plague made everything worse, offering a cynical cover but a terrifying personal risk. And through it all, the Church saw them as demons in human form, promising horrifyingly creative executions if caught by religious authorities. The very act of attempting to wash away the grime of their dangerous profession, or simply to find comfort in warm water, would have been fraught with the perceived risk of opening their bodies to the very unseen forces that stalked their short, brutal lives. In conclusion, the historical belief that people believed bathing opened the body to disease is a stark testament to a pre-scientific understanding of the human body and its interaction with the environment. The pervasive fear that warm water would open pores and allow bad air or evil spirits to enter the body profoundly shaped hygiene practices for centuries, leading to a widespread aversion to regular bathing. This misconception, while seemingly illogical to us, was a rational response within their own intellectual framework, highlighting a world where every decision, even one as simple as washing, was imbued with complex layers of medical theory, spiritual dread, and the constant, overwhelming struggle for survival against both visible and invisible threats. In stark contrast to the widespread medieval aversion to frequent bathing, a sentiment driven by the fear that warm water opened the body to disease and malevolent spirits, historical bathhouses, particularly in certain eras and cultures, occupied a fascinating and often contradictory position within society. Far from being mere places of physical cleansing, public bathhouses were vibrant social hubs, and sometimes delightfully or scandalously naughty. They transcended their primary function to become dynamic centers of community life, akin to bustling modern cafes or town squares, where people from all walks of life converged. Here, amidst the steam and the splash of water, individuals openly gossiped, made deals, and yes, sometimes much more, blurring the lines between commerce, camaraderie, and clandestine encounters, revealing a surprising dimension of social interaction that defied rigid moral codes. The origins of public bathhouses stretch back to antiquity, most famously exemplified by the Grand Roman Thermae. These colossal complexes were far more than just places to wash. They were sprawling centers of urban life, encompassing not only bathing pools of varying temperatures, but also gymnasiums, libraries, lecture halls, gardens, and even small shops. They were true public forums where citizens from all social classes could mingle, conduct business, engage in intellectual discourse, and unwind. This ancient tradition of the bathhouse as a social nexus persisted in various forms and regions, particularly thriving in the Byzantine Empire, the Islamic world, where hammams became central to urban life, and later experiencing a resurgence in medieval and early modern Europe before periods of decline. The fundamental appeal of these bathhouses was their multifaceted utility. They offered warmth in an era when home heating was rudimentary, providing a precious escape from the pervasive cold, especially in winter. They offered communal access to water and the means for physical cleansing, even if the understanding of hygiene differed vastly from our own. But their true power lay in their role as social hubs. Like bustling medieval markets or town squares, they were places where the rigid social hierarchies of the outside world could, to some extent, temporarily soften. Here, merchants might discuss trade routes, artisans might gossip about local scandals, scholars might debate philosophy, and ordinary folk might simply relax and exchange news. The shared, intimate experience of bathing, stripped of outer garments and formal attire, could foster a sense of camaraderie and openness, encouraging conversation and interaction that might be more constrained in other public spaces. The warm, humid air loosened tongues and relaxed inhibitions, making it easier for people to engage in casual chatter and deeper discussions alike. Within this relaxed, semi-public atmosphere, gossip flowed as freely as the steam. The bathhouse was a prime location for the exchange of news, rumors, and personal revelations. Secrets were whispered in steamy corners, alliances were subtly formed, and reputations were made or broken with a carefully placed word. This informal network of information was crucial in societies without newspapers or mass communication. News of political intrigue, recent arrests, upcoming marriages, or unfolding scandals would travel quickly through the bathhouse, providing a vital source of intelligence and entertainment for its patrons. It was a place where one could truly get the pulse of the community, observing who met whom, who avoided whom, and who lingered with a suspicious familiarity. Beyond mere social exchange, bathhouses were also significant centers for making deals. Merchants might negotiate prices, landowners discuss leases, and artisans finalize commissions amidst the steam and the splash of water. The informal setting, away from the rigid formalities of a counting house or a court, could facilitate more personal connections, fostering trust or revealing true intentions. Deals sealed in the relaxed atmosphere of the bathhouse might be seen as more binding, perhaps even witnessed by a broader array of individuals who could later attest to the agreement. It was a place where business and pleasure, the social and the commercial, intertwined seamlessly, making it an essential stop for anyone wishing to conduct affairs in the city. And yes, the historical truth is that bathhouses were sometimes much more. The very intimacy of the setting, the relaxed inhibitions, the communal nudity, and the anonymity offered by steam and crowds often led to naughty encounters. Prostitution, both male and female, was sometimes openly tolerated or discreetly facilitated within or around bathhouses, particularly in Roman and Islamic traditions, and even in some European bathhouses before stricter moral codes took hold. These establishments could become sites for clandestine rendezvous, illicit affairs, or casual sexual encounters. The steam provided natural concealment, the communal nature allowed for discreet flirtations, and the general atmosphere of leisure and indulgence could easily spill over into more intimate territory. This aspect made them both alluring and, to moral authorities, deeply suspect. The Church, in particular, often condemned public bathhouses for encouraging promiscuity and vice, leading to their eventual decline in many parts of Europe, or to stricter segregation by gender and more limited hours. This naughty element was a constant source of tension, reflecting the human desire for pleasure and connection in conflict with prevailing moral and religious dictates. Even in later periods, as European sensibilities shifted against public bathing, similar social functions moved to other venues, like the burgeoning coffee houses or salons, which became new hubs for gossip, deals, and clandestine connections, albeit with different rules of modesty. The bathhouse, however, retained its unique historical role as a space where the physical body, the social body, and sometimes the illicit desires of the individual converged in a surprisingly open and multifaceted environment. In conclusion, The historical reality reveals that bathhouses were vibrant social hubs, akin to bustling cafes, where people openly gossiped, made deals, and yes, sometimes much more. This profound social utility, ranging from everyday conversation to crucial business negotiations and even illicit encounters, cemented their indispensable role in various historical societies. They offered warmth, cleansing, and a vital space for communal interaction that defied the rigid hierarchies of the outside world. This complex interplay of social, commercial, and often naughty activities paints a fascinating picture of human life, demonstrating how even the most mundane of activities, like bathing, could become a dynamic stage for the full spectrum of human desires and interactions, constantly negotiating the fine line between public propriety and private indulgence. In the modern world, the act of bathing is a daily ritual, ingrained in our understanding of personal hygiene, health, and social acceptability. We assume that cleanliness, at least among the elite, has always been a constant pursuit. Yet, the historical truth, particularly throughout much of the medieval and early modern periods in Europe, defies this assumption, revealing a surprising and often unsettling reality. Lords and peasants, indeed almost everyone, bathed far less often than you'd think. This was not merely a matter of limited resources for the poor. It extended to the very pinnacle of society, where even kings bathed only a few times a year, relying instead on perfumes and powders to manage body odor and present an illusion of cleanliness. This widespread aversion to frequent washing stemmed from a complex web of rudimentary medical theories, prevailing superstitions, practical limitations, and a fundamentally different cultural understanding of hygiene, shaping daily life in ways that seem utterly counterintuitive to us today. The primary reason for this infrequent bathing, affecting all social strata, was a deeply held, pervasive medical belief: the miasma theory and the concept of open pores. As discussed previously, it was widely believed that disease was caused by bad air, miasma, emanating from decaying matter or stagnant environments. More critically, the skin was understood to be a porous membrane. The prevailing medical wisdom dictated that hot water, in particular, would cause the body's pores to open excessively, thereby providing unguarded gateways for the noxious miasma and potentially even evil spirits to enter the bloodstream, corrupting the humors and leading directly to illness, fever, or death. This belief created a profound apprehension towards full-body immersion in warm water. For both the common peasant and the wealthy noble, the perceived risk of inviting disease outweighed any perceived benefits of washing away visible dirt. The act of bathing was thus viewed as a dangerous vulnerability, a deliberate self-exposure to unseen, deadly threats. For peasants, the infrequency of bathing was also a matter of sheer practicality and resource scarcity. Their homes, crude and often single-roomed, lacked running water or private bathing facilities. Heating large quantities of water was an immense logistical challenge, requiring precious firewood that was scarce and expensive, especially in winter. Their labor-intensive lives left little time or energy for extensive washing rituals. Their exposure to dirt and grime was constant, a pervasive reality of agricultural work. Their hygiene revolved more around basic dry cleaning, brushing off dirt, shaking out clothes, and perhaps wiping exposed skin with a damp cloth if water was readily available. Personal cleanliness was a distant concern compared to the immediate, pressing needs of hunger, warmth, and survival. Their rough, unyielding wool clothing scratched their skin, offering little comfort but at least a constant physical barrier against the outside air, reinforcing the idea of a closed body. But the most striking revelation is the bathing habits of the elite. Even kings and queens, despite their immense wealth and access to resources, bathed only a few times a year. Royal inventories and personal accounts reveal a surprising lack of bathing tubs or regular bathing rituals. For monarchs and nobles, while the logistical constraints of heating water were less severe, the overriding fear of miasma and open pores remained paramount. Their physicians, steeped in humoral theory, would often advise against frequent bathing, especially during periods of plague or widespread illness. Their bodies were seen as delicate ecosystems, easily disturbed by external influences. Instead of bathing, the aristocracy developed elaborate practices of dry hygiene. They relied heavily on perfumes and powders to manage body odor and create an illusion of freshness. Fine linen shirts and shifts, changed frequently, absorbed sweat and bodily oils, providing a clean layer directly against the skin. These undergarments would be washed, while the outer garments, often made of expensive silks and velvets, were brushed and aired. Scented oils, fragrant waters, often distilled with herbs and spices rather than being true cleansing agents, pomanders filled with ambergris or civet, and various aromatic powders were liberally applied to the body, hair, and clothing. These weren't just for luxury. They served a crucial, perceived medical purpose: to ward off miasma. Good smells were thought to repel bad air, acting as a personal, aromatic shield against disease. The emphasis was on external presentation, on appearing clean and smelling pleasant, rather than on deep physical cleansing. A noble suite of chambers might include a powder room or a dressing room for these elaborate rituals of perfuming, oiling, and dusting, rather than a dedicated bathing chamber. The visual spectacle of cleanliness, the pleasant fragrance, were paramount to maintaining social status and conveying an aura of health and refinement, even if a full body wash had not occurred in months. The consequences of this infrequent bathing, particularly for the general population, were pervasive. Body odor was simply a part of life, often masked by strong scents. Skin conditions were common, and infestations of lice and fleas were a constant nuisance across all social strata. This reality also influenced social customs. People naturally kept more physical distance, and direct bodily contact was more often reserved for intimate relationships. It also shaped their understanding of disease, reinforcing the miasma theory as they observed the unpleasant smells that often accompanied illness and decay, mistakenly correlating odor with cause. In conclusion, the modern assumption that clean habits are timeless is a profound misconception. Lords and peasants, and indeed society as a whole, bathed far less often than you'd think. Even powerful kings bathed only a few times a year, primarily relying on perfumes and powders instead to create an illusion of cleanliness. This widespread practice was a direct consequence of deeply ingrained medical beliefs that viewed frequent washing, particularly with warm water, as a dangerous act that opened the body to deadly miasma and malevolent spirits. This historical reality dramatically shaped daily life, hygiene practices, and social interactions, painting a vivid picture of a world where fear of disease, practical limitations, and a fundamentally different understanding of the body conspired to keep people from the very comfort and cleanliness we now take for granted. In the modern era, our notions of cleanliness are inextricably linked with fresh water, fragrant soaps, and sparkling hygiene. The very thought of using bodily waste for domestic purposes is repugnant, a stark contrast to our sterile sensibilities. Yet, for vast stretches of human history, in a world utterly devoid of synthetic detergents and advanced chemical knowledge, resourcefulness dictated practices that now seem utterly shocking. The stark, undeniable truth is that urine was extensively used for cleaning clothes and teeth. Indeed, human pee was a common and valued ingredient in laundry, and astonishingly, even for whitening teeth. This versatile substance, collected in chamber pots and often referred to as chamber lye, served as an indispensable cleaning agent, revealing a profoundly different and often startlingly pragmatic approach to hygiene and resource management driven by necessity rather than modern concepts of sanitation. The primary chemical component that made urine so valuable for cleaning was ammonia. When urine, particularly human urine, is allowed to sit and ferment, the urea within it breaks down into ammonia. Ammonia is a powerful alkaline compound, a strong base, which makes it an excellent degreaser and cleaning agent. In an age before industrially produced soaps and detergents, ammonia-rich chamber lye was a readily available, effective, and often free alternative. Its alkalinity helped to cut through grease and grime, neutralize acids, and lift dirt from fabrics, making it an indispensable tool for household chores. For cleaning clothes or laundry, the process often involved soaking dirty garments in large vats or tubs filled with chamber lye. The clothes would sit, sometimes for hours or even overnight, allowing the ammonia to break down oils, stains, and dirt. After soaking, the garments would be vigorously agitated, stomped on, or beaten with paddles to further loosen the grime, before being rinsed, ideally in fresh running water, if available. This method, while certainly effective in removing dirt and grease, would have left the clothes with a distinctive pungent odor that would likely dissipate somewhat as they air-dried, particularly if rinsed thoroughly. This practice was widespread, from peasant cottages to the laundries of more affluent households, demonstrating its universal utility across social strata that lacked access to better, more expensive cleaning agents. The medieval fuller, a vital craftsman in the textile industry, relied heavily on stale urine for treating wool, a process called fulling, which cleaned and thickened the fabric, further demonstrating its industrial value. Perhaps even more startling and counterintuitive to modern sensibilities was the use of urine for whitening teeth. While minty toothpastes and chemical whiteners are staples of contemporary oral hygiene, historical approaches were far less refined. In some ancient and early modern cultures, fermented human urine was indeed used as a mouthwash or even directly applied to the teeth. The logic, again, lay in the presence of ammonia. Ammonia acts as a powerful bleaching agent. It could help to dissolve plaque, remove stains, and indeed whiten the enamel, albeit through a process that would be profoundly unpleasant to experience. One can only imagine the taste and smell associated with such an oral rinse, a stark testament to the lengths people would go for aesthetic ideals in a world where dental health was often poor and cosmetic solutions were desperately sought. This practice, though less universal than its use in laundry, is documented in historical accounts, including those from ancient Rome, where a particularly prized form of urine was sometimes imported for its perceived dental benefits. The widespread use of chamber lye for such varied purposes highlights several key aspects of historical life. Firstly, it underscores the principle of resourcefulness and zero waste that governed survival in pre-industrial societies. Every bodily byproduct, every natural element, was scrutinized for its potential utility. Nothing was wasted if it could serve a purpose. Secondly, it reveals a vastly different understanding of hygiene and sanitation. While we now associate urine with waste and potential biohazards, they perceived its chemical properties as beneficial for specific tasks, prioritizing effectiveness over what we now define as pleasantness or sterility. Their concept of clean was functional rather than entirely odorless or germ-free. Finally, it highlights the limitations of their chemical knowledge. They understood what worked, the cleaning power of stale urine, even if they didn't understand why, the breakdown of urea into ammonia. This empirical knowledge, passed down through generations, allowed them to manage daily challenges with the materials readily at hand. These practices also existed within a broader context of historical realities. Assassins, for example, living in constant anxiety and often in squalor, would have been acutely familiar with these methods. Their rough, unwashed clothes would have been treated with chamber lye laundry. Their targets, even nobles who bathed rarely, might also use ammonia-based solutions for their teeth or for cleaning various surfaces in their homes, bridging social divides through surprisingly common, if unpalatable, hygiene practices. The prevalence of disease, the lack of modern amenities, and the constant struggle for basic comfort meant that such raw, effective, if unpleasant, methods were not just accepted but indispensable for maintaining any semblance of cleanliness in their harsh lives. In conclusion, the historical reality that urine was extensively used for cleaning clothes and teeth, indeed, that human pee was a common ingredient in laundry and for whitening teeth, known as chamber lye, offers a startling glimpse into the resourcefulness and pragmatic hygiene of past societies. Driven by the absence of modern chemicals and a deep understanding of natural properties, people repurposed bodily waste for vital domestic tasks. This practice, utterly repellent to our modern sensibilities, was a testament to their ingenuity and adaptability in a world where every resource counted. It profoundly reshapes our understanding of historical cleanliness, revealing a fascinating, if sometimes unsettling chapter in the long human quest for survival and well-being. In the modern era, our understanding of health is inextricably linked with germ theory, hygiene, and the meticulous practice of cleanliness. We instinctively believe that washing away dirt, sanitizing our environments, and preventing the spread of bacteria are fundamental to well-being. Yet, for nearly 2 millennia, the dominant medical paradigm in the Western world painted a profoundly different, and often contradictory, picture. It was a world where the four humors decided how clean you should be, a system where health was meticulously based on balancing bodily fluids, and, startlingly, sometimes filth was actually seen as protective. This ancient and pervasive medical theory, far from being a quaint historical footnote, profoundly shaped daily hygiene practices, influencing everything from bathing habits to the treatment of disease, creating a landscape of health understanding utterly alien to our contemporary sensibilities. The bedrock of this medical worldview was the theory of the four humors, a concept inherited from ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates and later codified by Galen. This theory posited that the human body was composed of four cardinal fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Each humor was associated with specific qualities, e.g., blood with hot and moist, black bile with cold and dry, and linked to particular organs, temperaments, and even seasons. Health, in this system, was a state of perfect balance among these humors. Illness, conversely, was attributed to an imbalance, too much or too little of one humor, or a humor becoming corrupted. The role of the physician was not to fight germs, but to restore this delicate internal equilibrium through various interventions like bleeding, purging, diet, and lifestyle adjustments. Within this humoral framework, the skin was understood as a porous membrane, constantly interacting with the external environment. These tiny, invisible openings, the pores, were believed to be critical pathways for the expulsion of harmful vapors, excess humors, and other impurities from within the body, a vital process for maintaining internal balance. This understanding directly informed the widespread aversion to frequent washing, especially with warm water. The prevailing medical wisdom dictated that warm water would cause the body's pores to open excessively, dilating them beyond their natural, protective state. While superficially seeming beneficial for cleansing, this opening was seen as a dangerous vulnerability. It was feared that these expanded pores would then act as unguarded gateways, allowing harmful external elements to penetrate the body's interior. Foremost among these dreaded elements was bad air, or miasma, the prevailing theory of disease causation. Miasma theory posited that illnesses were caused by noxious fumes, corrupted air, or foul-smelling emanations rising from decaying matter, stagnant water, or unhygienic environments. If pores were opened by warm water, it was believed this invisible, disease-carrying bad air could easily enter the bloodstream, directly corrupting the humors and leading to illness, fever, or even death. The very air, especially in crowded, unsanitary medieval cities, was considered a vector of sickness, and therefore, exposing oneself to it through open pores was an act of profound self-endangerment. More startlingly, within this humoral framework, sometimes filth was actually seen as protective. The dirt and grime that accumulated on the skin were occasionally perceived not just as aesthetic blemishes, but as a beneficial layer. This layer of filth was thought to act as a physical barrier, a protective crust that sealed the pores, preventing the harmful miasma and other external contaminants from entering the body. The very dirt that our modern sensibilities recoil from was, for them, a natural defense mechanism. To wash it away, especially with warm water that opened the pores, was to strip the body of its natural armor, leaving it dangerously exposed to the unseen enemies lurking in the air. This belief justified infrequent bathing not merely as a practical necessity but as a prudent health strategy, particularly during periods of plague or widespread illness, when the fear of miasma was most acute. This perception meant that visible dirt was tolerated, even if strong perfumes and powders were used to counteract the accompanying odors, as the primary concern was internal health, not external sterility. This conviction profoundly shaped daily hygiene practices across all social strata. For the common peasant, limited resources already made frequent bathing impractical, but this humoral theory provided a medical justification for their infrequent washing. For the elite, even kings and queens, despite their immense wealth and access to resources, bathed only a few times a year, often preferring dry cleaning methods involving linen changes, perfumes, and powdered aromatics. Their physicians, deeply entrenched in humoral theory, would often advise against too much washing, seeing it as an unnecessary risk to the body's delicate balance. The focus shifted from physical cleanliness to humoral balance, making skin a permeable barrier rather than a waterproof shield. These beliefs permeated every aspect of life, influencing everything from personal habits to large-scale urban planning, which often focused on removing bad smells, miasma, rather than understanding disease vectors. An assassin, operating in this context, would have internalized these beliefs. Their constant exposure to unsanitary conditions, their vulnerability to disease, and their employer's distrust would all be navigated through this humoral lens. They faced the chilling risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk exacerbated by fears of bathing and a reliance on miasma theory. Their survival relied on primitive tools, living as beggars to hide, and enduring jobs that took weeks. They were often killed by their own employers or captured and horrifyingly executed with the church's blessing, which saw them as demons in human form. And through it all, they clung to beliefs like the protective filth, however strange, that offered a perceived defense in a world teeming with visible and invisible threats. In conclusion, the modern assumption that cleanliness is universally understood as beneficial is a profound misconception. The four humors decisively dictated how clean one should be in historical societies, asserting that health was based on balancing bodily fluids, and crucially, sometimes filth was seen as protective. This deeply ingrained medical theory, coupled with the pervasive fear of miasma and evil spirits entering through open pores, led to a widespread aversion to frequent bathing. This historical reality dramatically reshapes our understanding of historical hygiene, revealing a world where every decision about personal care was imbued with complex layers of medical theory, spiritual dread, and a profound, pragmatic need to survive against the perceived dangers of the very air they breathed. In the contemporary world, the act of washing, whether ourselves, our clothes, or our surroundings, is inextricably linked with the ubiquitous presence of soap. We are accustomed to a vast array of perfumed, specialized, and gentle cleansing agents, each promising a luxurious lather and effective removal of dirt and germs. Yet, for the vast majority of human history, this modern convenience was utterly unknown. The stark, often uncomfortable, truth is that they didn't have soap the way we do. The very concept of a solid, industrially produced, gentle cleansing bar was a distant future. Instead, soap was rare and harsh, a luxury often reserved for specific trades or the very wealthy. Consequently, most people just used water and sand, or even ashes, to perform their basic acts of cleansing, revealing a profoundly different, and often startlingly pragmatic, approach to hygiene rooted in necessity, resourcefulness, and a completely different understanding of cleanliness. The historical reality of soap was far removed from our modern understanding. While ancient civilizations did develop forms of cleansing agents by combining fats or oils with alkaline substances, like lye from wood ash, these were often crude, inconsistent, and highly caustic. Early soaps were more akin to industrial detergents, primarily used for fulling wool, tanning leather, or cleaning heavily soiled garments, rather than for personal hygiene. They were not designed for gentle application to skin. Indeed, their high alkalinity meant they could be quite harsh, causing irritation, dryness, and even burns. The process of making lye from wood ash was labor-intensive and imprecise, often resulting in varying strengths of alkalinity that could damage fabrics or skin. Thus, the notion of gentle soap for everyday personal use was practically non-existent for centuries. For the common person, the practical limitations of access and cost made commercially produced, albeit harsh, soap an unattainable luxury. Instead, their daily acts of cleansing revolved around the most basic, readily available elements provided by nature. Most people just used water and sand for washing themselves and their belongings. Water, when clean and accessible, was the primary cleansing agent. A peasant might wash their face and hands in a stream or from a communal well, but full-body immersion was rare due to the fear of disease, as warm water was believed to open pores to miasma and evil spirits, and the sheer difficulty of heating enough water. When they did wash, the abrasive quality of sand was put to use as a scrubbing agent. Rubbing sand vigorously against skin or fabric helped to physically abrade dirt, grime, and dead skin cells. This method, while certainly effective at removing visible particulate matter, would have been rough on the skin, leaving it coarse and perhaps prone to irritation. For laundering clothes, sand could be used to scrub out stains, acting as a crude abrasive detergent, though rinsing out all the grains would have been a tedious process. Even more common, and equally surprising to us, was the extensive use of ashes. Wood ash, a byproduct of every household fire, was readily available and universally understood to have cleansing properties. When mixed with a little water, ash forms a rudimentary alkaline solution, a weak lye, which could act as a mild degreaser and abrasive cleaner. For personal hygiene, ashes might be rubbed directly onto the skin and hair, especially to absorb oils and remove grime, before being brushed or rinsed off. This was particularly useful for hair, acting as a dry shampoo or a crude soap. For washing clothes, clothes might be laid over a layer of ash in a tub, and hot water poured over them, allowing the lye from the ash to percolate through the fabric, breaking down dirt and grease. This process was known as bucking. While effective, it would have left clothes with a distinctive earthy smell, and the residue of ash would need thorough rinsing. The constant presence of ash in their homes meant it was a universally accessible, free cleaning agent, utilized for everything from scrubbing floors to rudimentary personal care. These primitive cleaning methods directly influenced the reality of hygiene in historical periods. Body odor was simply a part of life, masked by perfumes for the wealthy, who still rarely bathed, and tolerated for the poor. Skin conditions, infestations of lice and fleas, and generally poor dental health were pervasive issues across all social strata. The limited effectiveness of their cleaning agents meant that true, deep cleanliness as we understand it was rarely achieved, contributing to the spread of disease, even if they misunderstood the underlying causes. This lack of effective soap and reliance on harsh, rudimentary methods profoundly impacted the lives of individuals across the social spectrum. An assassin, for instance, operating in this context, would have been intimately familiar with these practices. Their rough, unwashed clothes would have felt perpetually itchy, cleaned with the crude efficacy of chamber lye, fermented urine, or ash. Their teeth, if cared for at all, might have been subjected to the abrasive nature of ash or the sharp taste of urine. Their bodies, accustomed to minimal washing and harsh cleansing, would have carried the pervasive smells of their environment and their rudimentary hygiene. Their lives were already a brutal reality. They faced the constant risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by poor hygiene and the fear of bathing. Their grim work was often complicated by superstitions, with beliefs in curses and omens. Their employers were untrustworthy, often orchestrating their demise after a kill. Medieval cities were death traps, full of tight alleys, watchmen, and nosy drunks. Hiding bodies was almost impossible, with no clean-up crews or chemicals. Plague made everything worse, offering a cynical cover but a terrifying personal risk. Religion was a constant threat, seeing them as demons and promising horrifyingly creative executions if caught. And as for personal cleanliness, they operated without the fundamental tools we take for granted, making their very attempts at hygiene another form of enduring hardship. In conclusion, the modern assumption of easy cleanliness is a profound misconception. They didn't have soap the way we do. Instead, soap was rare and harsh, an industrial commodity rather than a personal care item. Consequently, most people just used water and sand, or even ashes, to clean themselves and their belongings. This fundamental lack of effective, gentle cleansing agents dramatically shaped daily life, hygiene practices, and the sensory experience of past societies. It highlights a world where ingenuity and resourcefulness dictated survival, transforming basic elements into essential, if often unpleasant, tools for managing cleanliness in the constant, gritty struggle against dirt, odor, and the pervasive fear of disease. In the contemporary world, the sanctity of the private bathroom is almost universally upheld. We expect clean, secluded facilities, equipped with flushing mechanisms and effective waste disposal systems, ensuring both hygiene and profound personal privacy. Yet, this modern comfort is a stark testament to centuries of evolution in sanitation, utterly alien to the realities of the past. The grim, unvarnished truth of medieval waste management reveals a system that was both ingenious for its time and utterly repugnant by our standards. Toilets were, for many, quite literally holes over rivers. Even within the formidable walls of a lord's stronghold, where one might expect greater refinement, castles had garderobes, little stone seats hanging directly over flowing water, or sometimes simply a cesspit. And far from offering modern solitude, these arrangements were emphatically not exactly private. This stark reality paints a vivid picture of a world where public health was poorly understood, convenience often trumped hygiene, and the very concept of individual privacy for basic bodily functions was largely non-existent. For the vast majority of the population, the peasants and common folk, sanitation was a matter of grim necessity and improvised solutions. In rural areas, waste was typically deposited in communal middens, dunghills, or simply in the fields, relying on natural decomposition and rainfall to disperse it, an unsanitary practice that contributed significantly to the spread of disease. In villages, communal pits might be dug, serving multiple households, often shallow and open to the elements. For those living near waterways, the most convenient, if environmentally disastrous, solution was to treat the nearest stream or river as a communal latrine. One would simply relieve oneself directly into the flowing water, relying on the current to carry the waste away. This created a paradoxical situation where the very water source used for drinking, cooking, and washing was simultaneously contaminated, a direct pathway for diseases like dysentery, cholera, and typhoid to spread through entire communities, decimating populations with horrifying efficiency. This was not a system based on design, but on default, a desperate reliance on natural processes that failed to account for the impact of concentrated human waste. Even within the imposing, supposedly sophisticated confines of castles, the notion of sanitation, while slightly more advanced than for the peasantry, remained shockingly rudimentary by modern standards. The primary form of toilet in a medieval castle was the garderobe. These were typically narrow, vertical shafts built into the thick walls of the castle, often originating from a small, closet-like projection or a recess within a chamber. At the top of this shaft was a little stone seat, a simple, unadorned bench with a hole cut into it. The waste dropped directly down the shaft, ideally to collect at the bottom in a cesspit that would periodically need to be emptied, a foul and dangerous task for unfortunate laborers, or more conveniently and often, to hang directly over flowing water, a moat, a river, or a ditch. This system relied on gravity and the natural flow of water to carry the waste away from the immediate vicinity of the castle walls. While seemingly ingenious for its time, especially compared to open pits, it was far from hygienic. The shafts were rarely cleaned, accumulating layers of filth that bred flies and emitted pervasive odors that permeated the surrounding chambers, a constant, unpleasant reminder of their function. Crucially, these garderobes were not exactly private. While they might be located within a lord's or lady's private chambers, the small recess or closet was rarely fully enclosed with a solid, lockable door. At best, there might be a curtain or a flimsy wooden door, offering visual concealment but no true auditory privacy. Nobles, their servants, and even visiting guests might be aware of, or even hear, the sounds emanating from these facilities. The concept of individual, secluded bathroom time was simply alien. Bodily functions were considered a natural, if somewhat indelicate, part of life, performed with a different set of social expectations around modesty. In communal castle living, where servants were omnipresent and chambers often served multiple functions, absolute solitude for such acts was an unheard of luxury. This lack of privacy extended beyond the physical act. The smell of the garderobe, particularly when the wind was wrong or the cesspit full, would have been a constant, undeniable presence, a permeating odor that reminded everyone of its function, regardless of their location within the castle. These sanitation methods had profound implications for public health. The contamination of rivers and ditches served as direct conduits for disease, turning waterways into deadly lifelines. The buildup of waste in cesspits, even within castles, created breeding grounds for rats, fleas, and other vectors of disease. The pervasive odors, while mistakenly believed to be the cause of illness, miasma theory, were in fact symptoms of truly unsanitary conditions that allowed pathogens to flourish. Despite the grandeur of the castles and the power of their inhabitants, they were just as vulnerable to epidemic disease as the poorest peasant, their primitive sanitation systems contributing directly to outbreaks of plague, dysentery, and other deadly ailments. These realities underscore how deeply different historical life was from our own. Assassins, operating in this environment, faced unique challenges. Cities were death traps, full of tight alleys, watchmen, and nosy drunks. They faced the risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk exacerbated by contaminated water sources and rampant filth. Their work was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Bodies were hard to hide, and plague made everything worse. Even in the most fortified castle, a potential target's proximity to a foul-smelling garderobe, or the assassin's need to navigate contaminated waterways, added layers of grim reality to their deadly tasks, constantly reminding them that their very existence was intertwined with a world of pervasive grime and precarious health. In conclusion, the modern convenience of the private bathroom is a truly revolutionary achievement. For centuries, toilets were, for many, literally holes over rivers, and even within the imposing walls of castles, garderobes, little stone seats hanging over flowing water or cesspits, were emphatically not exactly private. This stark historical reality paints a vivid, often unpleasant, picture of medieval sanitation. It reveals a world where waste management was rudimentary, public health poorly understood, and the concept of personal privacy for bodily functions largely absent, contributing directly to the pervasive presence of disease and the constant struggle for basic well-being in a society utterly alien to our contemporary standards of cleanliness. In our modern world, the ubiquitous role of toilet paper, soft, absorbent, and readily available, is a symbol of unparalleled convenience and hygiene, a product so ingrained in our daily lives that its absence is almost unimaginable. We take for granted its clean efficiency, its quiet simplicity. Yet, for the vast majority of human history, this seemingly basic necessity was utterly unknown. The stark, often uncomfortable, truth is that the very concept of toilet paper was alien. Instead, people had to try wool, hay, or a gooseneck. This grim reality of post-toilet hygiene reveals a profound difference in historical sanitation, where materials ranged from the marginally soft to the brutally abrasive, often dictated by social status and desperate resourcefulness. Wealthy people sometimes used soft cloth. Poor people, conversely, had leaves, or tragically, nothing at all. This paints a vivid, often squirm-inducing picture of daily life, where cleanliness was a constant, crude negotiation, and personal comfort a distant, unattainable dream for most. The materials used for post-defecation cleansing varied wildly, reflecting both geographical availability and, most profoundly, social class. For the common peasant, living a life defined by scarcity and constant toil, the choices were incredibly limited and often harsh. Hay, readily available in agricultural communities, was a common, if highly abrasive, option. Its coarse, dry stalks, while providing some absorbency, would have been rough and irritating against the skin, offering little comfort and perhaps leaving behind itchy residue. Similarly, straw, another ubiquitous byproduct of farming, was also pressed into service, sharing hay's drawbacks of texture and comfort. The practicality outweighed the pleasantness. These materials were free, accessible, and served a basic function, however crudely. The pain and discomfort associated with such rough wiping would have been a daily, undeniable reality, a small but constant torment in their already arduous lives. Even more startling to modern sensibilities was the use of a gooseneck, specifically the cleaned, plucked neck of a goose, or sometimes a swan, used as a sort of organic wiping tool. This grotesque innovation was prized for its pliant, somewhat flexible and smooth surface, supposedly more gentle than coarse hay or leaves. It speaks volumes about the lengths people would go to for a modicum of comfort or cleanliness when other options were so limited. This bizarre practice, while not universal, is documented in some historical accounts and satirical works, underscoring the stark reality of their available tools. It highlights a utilitarian mindset where every part of an animal, even its neck after consumption, was repurposed, pushing the boundaries of what we consider acceptable for personal hygiene. For the vast majority of the impoverished population, the alternative to hay or a gooseneck was even more basic: leaves found in nature. Depending on the season and local flora, leaves of varying sizes and softness would be gathered and used. While some broad, soft leaves, like mallow or certain dock leaves, might have offered a degree of comfort, others would have been coarse, irritating, or potentially allergenic, introducing new discomforts. The seasonal availability of leaves also meant that in winter, with bare trees and frozen ground, options dwindled, forcing reliance on stored hay or even more desperate measures. And for the very poorest, or in times of extreme scarcity, the brutal truth was nothing at all. This meant resorting to water alone, if available and safe enough, or simply relying on friction from clothing or the bare hand, a practice that would exacerbate unsanitary conditions and contribute to disease. At the other end of the social spectrum, wealthy people sometimes used soft cloth. These would be scraps of old linen or wool, perhaps discarded from worn-out garments or specifically designated for this purpose. While certainly a vast improvement over hay or leaves, these cloths were rarely single-use. They would be washed and reused, a practical necessity in a world where textiles were valuable commodities. The washing process, often involving harsh agents like chamber lye, fermented urine, and vigorous scrubbing, might not have rendered them truly sterile, but they offered a considerable comfort advantage over the peasant's lot. This luxury of soft cloth was a clear marker of status, distinguishing the elite from the masses, even in the most private of moments. These crude hygiene methods directly contributed to the widespread presence of disease in historical societies. The lack of effective cleansing materials meant that fecal matter, a prime vector for bacteria and parasites, was often not thoroughly removed, leading to rampant infections like dysentery, worms, and other gastrointestinal ailments. The hands, used for wiping and then for preparing food, became easy conduits for disease transmission. This fundamental lack of sanitation, coupled with poor understanding of germ theory, as people believed bathing itself opened pores to disease, created a perpetual cycle of illness that decimated populations. An assassin, operating in this historical context, would have been intimately familiar with these realities. Their lives, already defined by constant peril, were further complicated by the pervasive unsanitary conditions. They faced the chilling risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by poor hygiene and the constant exposure to contaminated environments. Their grim work was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Medieval cities were death traps, full of tight alleys, watchmen, and nosy drunks. Hiding bodies was almost impossible, with no clean-up crews or chemicals. Plague made everything worse, offering a cynical cover but a terrifying personal risk. Religion was a constant threat, seeing them as demons. The night wasn't their friend, teeming with criminals and wild dogs. And even for basic bodily functions, the assassin, whether disguised as a beggar or attempting to pass as a traveler, would have to contend with the same brutal realities of hygiene. Far from the clean efficiency of modern life, their constant anxiety amplified by the pervasive discomfort and threat of infection from the simplest of daily acts. In conclusion, the modern convenience of toilet paper is a profoundly recent luxury. For centuries, toilet paper was an alien concept. Instead, people had to try wool, hay, or a gooseneck, a stark testament to the crude realities of historical hygiene. Yes, wealthy people sometimes used soft cloth, but the impoverished masses relied on harsh leaves, or tragically, nothing at all. This historical truth paints a vivid, often uncomfortable picture of daily life, where cleanliness was a constant, pragmatic negotiation, and where the most basic human needs were met with ingenuity born of scarcity, revealing a world utterly alien to our contemporary standards of comfort and sanitation. In the contemporary world, the ritual of washing one's hair is a near-daily practice, often involving an array of specialized shampoos, conditioners, and styling products, all promising shine, cleanliness, and health. We associate clean hair with good hygiene, freshness, and social acceptance. Yet, for vast stretches of human history, particularly throughout the medieval and early modern periods in Europe, the very concept of hair washing as we know it was largely absent. The stark, often surprising, truth is that hair wasn't washed often. It was primarily oiled and powdered. The prevailing approach to hair care was more about covering it with hoods or elaborate headwear, or, strikingly, oiling it to keep bugs away, revealing a profoundly different, and often counterintuitive, understanding of cleanliness, beauty, and pest control driven by both prevailing medical theories and the harsh realities of their environment. The infrequent washing of hair was deeply intertwined with a broader historical aversion to frequent full-body bathing. As previously discussed, the dominant medical theory of the time, humoral theory, combined with miasma theory, posited that warm water would open the body's pores, allowing harmful bad air, miasma, or even evil spirits to enter, causing disease. This belief extended to the scalp and hair. Washing the hair thoroughly with water, especially warm water, was thought to be risky, potentially exposing the delicate brain to external contaminants and upsetting the body's humoral balance. Thus, cleanliness, in their view, was not about removing dirt with water and soap, which was rare and harsh, but about maintaining the body's internal equilibrium and protecting it from external airborne threats. Given this medical framework, alternative methods of hair care evolved. Rather than washing, the primary strategy was covering it with hoods or elaborate headwear. For peasants and common folk, hoods, caps, and head wraps served both practical and social purposes. They offered protection from the elements, sun, wind, rain, and cold, and also helped to contain the hair, keeping it somewhat cleaner from the pervasive dust and grime of daily labor. For women, especially after marriage, covering the hair was also a strict social and religious expectation, a sign of modesty and respectability. Noblemen and women, too, wore elaborate headwear, wigs, hats, and veils, not just as fashion statements, but as part of their dry hygiene regimen. These coverings served to conceal unwashed hair and to protect it from visible dirt and potential infestations, while also signifying status and adherence to social norms. The hair underneath was rarely truly clean, but its outward presentation was managed through concealment. Beyond covering, the practice of oiling and powdering the hair was central to historical hair care. Various types of oils, animal fats, vegetable oils like olive or almond oil, were applied to the hair and scalp. This served multiple purposes. Firstly, it helped to manage the hair, making it less brittle, taming frizz, and giving it a somewhat styled appearance, even if unwashed. It added a sheen that, to their aesthetic, might have been considered desirable. Secondly, and critically, oiling it to keep bugs away was a vital function. Lice, fleas, and other parasites were a pervasive problem across all social strata in historical periods, thriving in unwashed hair and close living conditions. Oils, particularly those with strong scents or repellent properties, like lavender or rosemary oil, if infused, could deter these pests or at least make the scalp less hospitable for them. The oil essentially suffocated existing parasites or made it difficult for new ones to adhere. This was a form of pragmatic pest control, chosen out of necessity in an age without effective insecticides. Powders, made from finely ground herbs, scented starches, or even powdered minerals, were also liberally applied. These powders served to absorb excess oil, mask unpleasant odors from unwashed hair and scalp, and provide a fresh, perfumed scent that was considered a mark of cleanliness and refinement for the wealthy. They also added volume and texture, contributing to desired hairstyles. While effective at superficial cleansing and deodorizing, these powders did not truly wash the hair. They merely concealed the underlying lack of cleanliness. The combination of oil and powder would have created a distinctive texture, far from the light, airy feel of freshly shampooed hair, likely heavy and potentially clumpy over time. These methods of hair care directly highlight the vast differences in historical hygiene. Body odor was simply a part of life, often masked by strong perfumes for the wealthy, who still rarely bathed. Skin conditions were common, and infestations of lice and fleas were a constant nuisance. The fundamental belief that bathing opened the body to disease also contributed to the avoidance of hair washing, as the scalp was seen as particularly vulnerable. An assassin, operating in this environment, would have been intimately familiar with these realities. Their desperate existence meant their own hygiene would be basic, their hair cared for in these traditional ways. Their rough, unwashed clothes, treated with chamber lye or ash, would reflect their station. Their bodies, accustomed to minimal washing, would carry the pervasive smells of their environment and their rudimentary hygiene. They faced the constant risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by poor hygiene and the constant exposure to contaminated environments. Their grim work was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Medieval cities were death traps, and hiding bodies was almost impossible. Plague made everything worse, and religion was a constant threat. The night wasn't their friend, teeming with dangers. Even the most fundamental acts of personal care were fraught with perceived risks and practical limitations, turning hair care into another stark reminder of the challenges of their lives. In conclusion, the modern ritual of hair washing is a testament to technological and scientific progress. For centuries, hair wasn't washed often. It was primarily oiled and powdered. The prevailing approach to hair care was more about covering it with hoods or elaborate headwear, or, strikingly, oiling it to keep bugs away, driven by archaic medical theories, a lack of effective cleansing agents, and the pervasive problem of parasites. This historical reality dramatically reshapes our understanding of personal hygiene in the past, revealing a world where cleanliness was negotiated through concealment, fragrance, and pragmatic pest control, a far cry from the fresh, clean hair we take for granted today. In the contemporary world, the mere mention of lice or fleas conjures images of unhygienic conditions, a problem confined to specific circumstances or an unfortunate, isolated inconvenience to be swiftly eradicated with modern treatments. We associate such infestations with a lack of cleanliness, something utterly foreign to our sanitized lives, especially for those of high status. Yet, the stark, uncomfortable truth of history shatters this modern illusion. Lice and fleas were not just common, they were normal, even for royalty. This was not a mark of personal failing but an inescapable reality of life across all social strata, from the poorest peasant to the most powerful monarch. Indeed, everyone had them. Consequently, daily life involved a constant, often losing battle against these pervasive parasites, necessitating crude yet effective methods like the widespread use of lice combs and the desperate, often drastic measure of burning bedding to kill pests, revealing a world utterly unfamiliar with modern pest control and hygiene. The ubiquity of lice, head lice, body lice, and pubic lice, and fleas, often carried by rats, other vermin, and domestic animals, stemmed from a confluence of factors deeply embedded in historical living conditions. Firstly, the prevailing aversion to frequent bathing, driven by the belief that warm water opened pores to disease, meant that bodies and hair were rarely thoroughly washed. This created an ideal environment for parasites to thrive, with ample dirt, oil, and dead skin cells providing both sustenance and shelter. Secondly, the nature of medieval and early modern housing contributed significantly. Homes, from peasant hovels to grand castles, often had earthen or straw floors, walls made of porous materials like wattle and daub, and thatched roofs, all perfect breeding grounds and hiding places for fleas and lice. Vermin, particularly rats and mice, were omnipresent, carrying fleas that would readily jump to human hosts. Domestic animals, often sharing living quarters, added to the infestation burden. Thirdly, clothing was rarely washed thoroughly or frequently. Outer garments might be worn for weeks or months without cleaning, providing safe havens for parasites to live and lay eggs. The very structure of their lives, from their hygiene habits to their living arrangements, was a perfect incubator for these persistent pests. The presence of lice and fleas was normal, even for royalty. Accounts from royal courts, personal letters, and satirical writings confirm that monarchs, queens, princes, and princesses were as susceptible as the lowliest commoner. Sumptuous gowns and velvet cloaks might conceal the constant itching, but they did not prevent the infestations. While the wealthy had the luxury of more frequent changes of linen undergarments, which were washable, and access to fine combs and scented powders, these were often insufficient to eradicate the tenacious parasites. Courtiers, nobles, and their vast retinue of servants lived in close quarters within castles, making the spread of lice and fleas almost inevitable. Royal beds, despite their elaborate hangings and rich fabrics, were prime breeding grounds, warmed by human bodies and rarely subjected to the kind of thorough cleaning that would eliminate pests. The discomfort was a shared experience across the social hierarchy, a humbling reminder of human vulnerability to nature's smaller inhabitants. Given the pervasive nature of these infestations, people developed various methods to combat them, ranging from daily annoyance to desperate measures. The lice comb was a ubiquitous tool, found in almost every household. These were finely toothed combs, often made of bone, wood, or sometimes more expensive materials like ivory for the wealthy. The daily ritual of combing one's hair to remove lice and nits, lice eggs, was a common practice, a mundane yet constant battle against the itching and discomfort. It was a tedious, often unpleasant task, typically performed by family members for each other, or by servants for their masters. While effective at removing some parasites, it was rarely a permanent solution, as reinfestation was almost guaranteed in their living conditions. The constant scratching, the telltale presence of nits in hair, were accepted realities of human existence. For a more drastic and often necessary measure, people often burned bedding to kill pests. When an infestation became unbearable, or after an illness where the bedding was likely heavily contaminated, the only truly effective way to eradicate the lice, fleas, and their eggs was through incineration. Straw mattresses, bundles of hay, and even heavily infested blankets that were beyond conventional cleaning, which involved harsh lye and immense effort, would be piled up and set alight outside the dwelling. This was not a casual act. It represented a significant economic loss, as bedding materials were valuable. But the immediate relief from the relentless itching and the hope of preventing further spread of disease often outweighed the cost. The smoke and smell of burning straw and wool, mingled with the acrid scent of incinerated parasites, would be a grim yet common odor in communities grappling with infestations. This dramatic act underscored the sheer desperation of their fight against these tiny, but incredibly resilient, tormentors. These realities deeply affected the daily lives of historical assassins. Their rough, unwashed clothes, often worn for weeks, provided a ready home for parasites. Their hair, rarely washed with proper soap and instead oiled and powdered, would have been a constant source of irritation, distracting them from their grim tasks. The very secrecy of their profession, living as beggars in squalid conditions or sleeping in strange, unhygienic places, would have made them particularly susceptible to infestations. They faced the constant risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by the diseases spread by fleas, like plague. Their work was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Medieval cities were death traps, and hiding bodies was almost impossible. Plague made everything worse, and religion was a constant threat. The night wasn't their friend, and their basic hygiene was primitive. Their pervasive anxiety, waiting for death to find them, was only compounded by the constant, relentless itching of invisible enemies clinging to their skin and hair, a constant, irritating reminder of the brutal realities of their existence. In conclusion, the modern assumption of a pest-free existence is a profound luxury. For centuries, lice and fleas were normal. Even for royalty, everyone had them. Consequently, daily life involved a constant, often losing battle against these pervasive parasites, necessitating crude yet effective methods like the widespread use of lice combs and the desperate, often drastic measure of burning bedding to kill pests. This historical reality dramatically reshapes our understanding of personal hygiene and daily comfort in the past, revealing a world where humanity, regardless of status, lived in intimate, uncomfortable proximity to its smaller, persistent inhabitants, constantly battling an unseen enemy that inflicted endless irritation and, often, deadly disease. In the contemporary world, the concept of body odor is often a source of social discomfort, swiftly banished by a vast array of antiperspirants and deodorants designed to eliminate sweat and neutralize smell at its source. We prioritize freshness, a clean scent, and the complete absence of natural bodily odors. Yet, for vast stretches of human history, particularly throughout the medieval and early modern periods in Europe, the very notion of eliminating body odor was largely unknown, and the means to do so were entirely non-existent. The stark, often surprising, truth is that perfumes and herbs were the medieval deodorants. Their primary function was not to stop sweat or kill odor-causing bacteria, but simply to conceal or overpower the inevitable smells of unwashed bodies and clothing. Thus, natural aromatics like lavender, rosemary, and vinegar were meticulously used to mask body odor, not eliminate it, revealing a profoundly different, and often pragmatic, approach to personal fragrance driven by necessity and the prevailing understanding of hygiene. The infrequent washing of bodies and hair, a widespread practice rooted in the belief that bathing opened pores to disease, meant that body odor was simply an accepted, pervasive reality of daily life across all social strata. People wore clothes for extended periods without washing them, and thorough full-body immersion was rare for fear of miasma. This created a constant low-grade odor that permeated homes, public spaces, and even the air around individuals. In this context, the purpose of deodorants was not to achieve modern sterility, but to make the human presence more palatable, more agreeable, or to subtly signify status. Perfumes, in various forms, were the primary tools in this aromatic arsenal, particularly for the wealthy. These were often oil-based concoctions infused with rich, natural essences. The use of strong, potent floral and herbal scents was not just for luxury. It was a necessity for masking the underlying bodily odors. These perfumes might be applied directly to the skin, rubbed into clothing, or even infused into pomanders, small, decorative balls or containers filled with aromatic substances like ambergris, civet, musk, or fragrant resins, which would be carried by hand or worn around the neck or waist. The wearer would frequently raise the pomander to their nose, not only to enjoy the scent but also to create a personal aromatic shield against unpleasant smells from their own body or the generally malodorous environments they inhabited. The richer and more exotic the perfume, the more powerful its masking ability, and the higher the status of the wearer. Beyond the elaborate perfumes of the elite, common people and the less wealthy relied on more accessible herbs as their primary deodorizing agents. These were often strong-smelling botanicals whose natural fragrances could temporarily overpower or intermingle with body odor. Lavender, with its clean, floral, and slightly camphoric scent, was widely popular. Bundles of dried lavender might be carried, sewn into sachets within clothing, or rubbed directly onto the skin. Its pleasant aroma was known to be refreshing and was also believed to possess protective qualities against disease and evil spirits. Rosemary, with its pungent, pine-like aroma, was another favored herb. Like lavender, it was used for its strong scent, which could mask less desirable odors, and was also believed to have invigorating and protective properties. These herbs were often simply crushed in the hand and rubbed onto the skin, or infused into oils for application. Their use was a pragmatic attempt to improve personal scent in a world without effective body washes or antiperspirants. A surprising, yet highly effective, aromatic agent was vinegar. Its sharp, acidic smell, while not inherently pleasant, had powerful odor-neutralizing properties. Vinegar was often diluted with water and used as a cleansing rinse for the face, hands, or even the hair, as a substitute for soap, which was rare and harsh. It could help to remove some surface grime and, crucially, cut through and temporarily neutralize strong bodily odors, leaving a transiently cleaner scent. Its acidity might also have had a mild antiseptic effect, offering some benefit beyond mere masking. A cloth dampened with vinegar might be used to wipe down the body, providing a quick, if temporary, feeling of refreshment. This was a common, accessible, and surprisingly effective method for quick deodorization in a time when options were severely limited. These methods of scent management directly highlight the fundamental differences in historical hygiene. Body odor was simply a fact of life, to be concealed rather than eliminated at its source. True, deep cleanliness as we understand it was rarely achieved due to the belief that bathing opened the body to disease and the lack of effective cleansing agents. Lice and fleas were normal, even for royalty, living in unwashed hair that was instead oiled and powdered to deter pests. The very essence of their personal care was about managing, masking, and coping with the reality of continuous odors and infestations. An assassin, operating in this environment, would have been intimately familiar with these practices. Their own desperate existence meant their hygiene would be rudimentary, their hair oiled to deter pests. Their rough, unwashed clothes, treated with chamber lye or ash, would carry the pervasive smells of their environment. They faced the constant risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by poor hygiene and ubiquitous pests. Their work was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Medieval cities were death traps, and hiding bodies was almost impossible. Plague made everything worse, and religion was a constant threat. The night wasn't their friend, teeming with dangers. Toilets were often holes over rivers, and toilet paper was non-existent. Even the most basic attempts at personal freshness relied on masking, adding another layer of sensory reality to their grim, perilous lives. In conclusion, the modern ritual of applying antiperspirant is a testament to our profound desire for odorless perfection. For centuries, perfumes and herbs were the medieval deodorants, a stark reflection of a pre-scientific understanding of the body and its emissions. Lavender, rosemary, and vinegar were meticulously used to mask body odor, not eliminate it, acknowledging its presence rather than eradicating its source. This historical reality dramatically reshapes our understanding of personal care in the past, revealing a world where freshness was achieved through aromatic concealment, and where the pervasive smells of unwashed bodies were simply a part of the sensory landscape, managed with ingenuity, but never truly eliminated. In our modern world, access to clean, potable water is often considered a fundamental human right, flowing effortlessly from taps, readily available in bottles, and rigorously purified to eliminate pathogens. We drink it without a second thought, trusting its safety. Yet, for vast stretches of human history, particularly throughout the medieval period and well into the early modern era, this taken-for-granted commodity was a perilous rarity. The stark, uncomfortable truth is that water sources were profoundly polluted, so people, driven by necessity and a rudimentary understanding of safety, largely drank beer. The very notion of clean, untainted water was an exception, not the rule. Consequently, clean water was rare, so they drank weak, small beer every day, even kids, transforming a fermented beverage into a ubiquitous, indispensable staple of daily life, a safer alternative to the deadly perils lurking in seemingly clear streams and wells. The ubiquitous pollution of water sources stemmed from a complex interplay of factors inherent to pre-industrial societies. Without modern sanitation systems, human and animal waste was often disposed of indiscriminately, flowing into rivers, streams, and shallow wells, which served as primary water sources for drinking, cooking, and washing. Growing urban centers, particularly medieval cities with their dense populations and lack of proper sewage, exacerbated this problem, turning waterways into open sewers. Industrial activities, though rudimentary, also contributed. Tanneries, dye works, and various crafts often discharged their waste directly into rivers. The sheer volume of organic matter and human refuse meant that most readily accessible water was teeming with bacteria, viruses, and parasites, the unseen agents of deadly diseases like dysentery, cholera, and typhoid. Drinking unboiled, untreated water was a gamble with death, a daily lottery that often claimed lives, particularly those of the vulnerable young. This terrifying reality forced a widespread adaptation, the consumption of fermented beverages as a primary source of hydration. People largely drank beer, not for recreational intoxication, but as a crucial matter of survival and public health. The process of brewing beer involves boiling water, which effectively kills most harmful bacteria and pathogens. While they didn't understand germ theory, they empirically observed that people who drank beer or wine tended to be healthier than those who relied solely on raw water. This practical observation led to beer becoming an indispensable part of their diet. The type of beer they consumed was not the strong, alcoholic brew we typically associate with modern indulgence. Instead, they drank weak, small beer every day. This was a low-alcohol beverage, often containing less than 1% alcohol by volume, sometimes even brewed from the second or third run-through of the grain mash. Its primary purpose was hydration and nutrition, not intoxication. The alcohol content was too low to cause significant drunkenness with normal consumption, making it safe for continuous drinking throughout the day. It provided calories, vitamins, especially B vitamins from the yeast, and, most importantly, a safer liquid than polluted water. Brewing was a common household chore, performed regularly by women, ensuring a constant supply of this vital beverage. The astonishing truth was that this weak, small beer was consumed by everyone, even kids. Children, whose developing immune systems were particularly vulnerable to waterborne pathogens, were given small beer from a very young age, often mixed with milk or gruel. It was considered a safer, healthier alternative to water, a foundational component of their diet from infancy. The idea of children drinking beer daily would be scandalous today, but in the context of medieval sanitation, it was a prudent, life-saving practice. It provided necessary fluids without the overwhelming risk of contamination, becoming as fundamental to their daily existence as eating bread. This pervasive reliance on beer also highlights the context of other historical practices. Infrequent bathing, driven by the belief that warm water opened pores to disease, made more sense when clean bathing water was so scarce and risky. The use of chamber lye, fermented urine, for laundry and even teeth cleaning was another example of extreme resourcefulness when soap was rare and fresh water for rinsing was often contaminated. Their vulnerability to diseases spread by polluted water was profound, contributing significantly to high mortality rates, particularly during outbreaks. An assassin, operating in this environment, would have been intimately familiar with this reality. Their rigorous training didn't grant them immunity from the dangers of contaminated water. They faced the chilling risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by the ubiquity of waterborne illnesses. Their life was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Medieval cities were death traps, full of contaminated alleys and crowded, unsanitary conditions. Hiding bodies was almost impossible, with contaminated rivers often their only option for disposal. Plague made everything worse, and religion was a constant threat. The night wasn't their friend, teeming with criminals and wild dogs. And their basic hygiene was primitive, with no soap and toilets that were holes over rivers. The knowledge that even the seemingly harmless act of taking a drink could bring on a debilitating illness would have added another layer of constant anxiety to their already precarious existence, forcing them to rely on brewed beverages not as a choice, but as a grim necessity for survival. In conclusion, the modern assumption of readily available, clean drinking water is a profound luxury. For vast stretches of history, water sources were dangerously polluted, so people widely drank beer. This fundamental reality meant that clean water was rare, forcing them to consume weak, small beer every day, even children, as a crucial, life-saving alternative to contaminated water. This historical truth dramatically reshapes our understanding of daily life, diet, and public health in the past, revealing a world where a fermented beverage was not primarily for recreation, but an indispensable, safer liquid that flowed through the veins of society, a testament to human adaptability in the face of profound environmental and health challenges. In the contemporary world, menstrual hygiene is largely a private, discreet affair, facilitated by a vast array of absorbent, disposable products designed for comfort and convenience. We take for granted the ease with which women manage their cycles, allowing them to participate fully and seamlessly in public life regardless of the day of the month. Yet, for vast stretches of human history, this modern convenience was utterly unknown, and the very act of menstruation was imbued with cultural taboos, practical challenges, and often significant social restrictions. The stark, uncomfortable truth is that women had to rely on herbal menstrual remedies and rudimentary rags to manage their monthly cycles. There were no pads or tampons as we know them. Instead, women used absorbent cloth, soft moss, or even specific herbs for protection. This profound lack of effective, discreet menstrual products meant that sometimes, out of necessity or social custom, they just stayed indoors, revealing a remarkably different, and often difficult, experience of womanhood deeply shaped by both biological realities and societal expectations. The management of menstruation in historical periods was a profoundly personal and often ingenious improvisation. Without the benefit of modern absorbent technologies, women had to rely on materials readily available in their environment. Cloth, typically scraps of old linen or wool from worn-out garments, was the most common and practical option. These rags would be folded or rolled and placed to absorb the flow. While offering some absorbency, they would have been bulky, uncomfortable, and prone to leakage, requiring frequent changes. The process of cleaning these rags was also arduous, involving vigorous washing, often with harsh agents like chamber lye, fermented urine, or ash, and then discreet drying, a chore that added significantly to women's already demanding labor. The very act of washing these blood-stained cloths would have been physically demanding and culturally sensitive, often done in private or during specific times to avoid public scrutiny. Beyond cloth, ingenuity led to the use of natural materials. Moss, particularly softer varieties like sphagnum moss, was a surprisingly effective absorbent. Its natural properties allowed it to soak up fluids relatively well, and it could be found in abundance in many regions. However, its use would have been labor-intensive, requiring careful collection and preparation to ensure it was clean enough for intimate use. Similarly, herbs, sometimes specifically chosen for their absorbent, astringent, or antimicrobial properties, might have been integrated into menstrual pads or poultices. While the primary function of herbs in menstrual health was often medicinal, to alleviate pain, regulate flow, or aid fertility, their physical presence could also contribute to absorption. These natural alternatives, while practical, highlight the crude and often uncomfortable realities of historical menstrual hygiene, far from the discreet comfort of modern products. The profound lack of effective, discreet menstrual products had significant social implications, often leading to women curtailing their activities during their cycles. Sometimes they just stayed indoors, a practice rooted in a complex blend of necessity, social custom, and pervasive taboos. The fear of leakage, of visible stains on clothing, was a powerful motivator for women to limit their public appearances. A visible stain could bring shame, embarrassment, and social stigma. Beyond practical concerns, many cultures held strong beliefs about menstrual blood being ritually impure or having harmful magical properties. This led to specific taboos. Menstruating women might be forbidden from participating in religious ceremonies, from preparing certain foods, lest they spoil or cause harm, or from engaging in sexual intercourse. While these restrictions might appear purely oppressive, they sometimes inadvertently provided women with a rare, albeit forced, period of rest from arduous labor, offering a brief respite that was otherwise unobtainable in their demanding lives. This enforced seclusion, whether self-imposed for practicality or dictated by custom, profoundly shaped women's participation in public life and their personal freedom. These realities also tie into broader historical contexts. The widespread belief that bathing opened the body to disease, leading to infrequent washing, meant body odor and general uncleanliness were pervasive, making menstrual odors even harder to manage. The lack of soap the way we do meant harsh alternatives were used for washing rags. Water sources were polluted, so people drank beer, highlighting the unsanitary conditions that contributed to disease spread. Toilets were holes over rivers, and toilet paper was non-existent, forcing reliance on crude wiping materials, further complicating menstrual hygiene. Lice and fleas were normal, even for royalty, indicating a constant battle with pests that thrived in unwashed bodies and bedding, adding to the general discomfort. For an assassin, if female, navigating such realities would add immense layers of complexity to her already perilous existence. Beyond the general risks, she would face the constant challenge of maintaining discretion and hygiene during her cycle, a task made exponentially harder by the lack of effective products. The physical discomfort, the fear of leakage, and the need for frequent, clandestine changes would be a constant, gnawing anxiety. If disguised as a beggar, the rags would blend, but the issue of cleanliness would persist. If a noble, the fine clothes would absorb, but the underlying challenge would remain. The very act of operating in the shadows, of needing to remain undetected for weeks, would be profoundly impacted by these biological realities, a testament to the immense physical and mental fortitude required for any woman in such a profession. In conclusion, the modern convenience of disposable menstrual products is a testament to vast societal and technological advancements. For centuries, women had to rely on herbal menstrual remedies and rudimentary rags. There were no pads, forcing them to use available cloth, soft moss, or even specific herbs for protection. This profound lack of effective, discreet solutions meant that sometimes they just stayed indoors, a practice born of both necessity and cultural taboos. This historical reality dramatically reshapes our understanding of daily life and womanhood in the past, revealing a world where the biological rhythm of menstruation was a significant challenge, managed with ingenuity and fortitude, often in a context of limited comfort and pervasive social scrutiny. In the modern world, the routine of dental hygiene is a cornerstone of daily health, involving toothbrushes, fluoride toothpastes, and regular visits to the dentist, all designed to ensure sparkling white teeth, fresh breath, and lifelong oral health. We understand the invisible war waged against plaque and cavities, armed with scientifically formulated products. Yet, for the vast majority of human history, this meticulous approach was utterly unknown. The very concept of dental hygiene was primitive, a constant, often losing, battle against decay and discomfort, primarily fought with rudimentary tools like chewing sticks and the surprising application of burnt bread. There were no dentists as we know them, no fluoride, no antiseptic mouthwashes. Instead, crude abrasives like charcoal, crushed herbs, or even pulverized burnt bread were vigorously rubbed on teeth. And with a grim, knowing certainty, the historical record attests that no, it didn't always work, revealing a profoundly different, and often painful, approach to oral care driven by necessity, folk wisdom, and a pervasive lack of effective solutions. The prevalence of poor dental health in historical populations is well documented by archaeological evidence, ranging from widespread tooth decay and abscesses to significant tooth loss even in relatively young adults. This grim reality stemmed from several factors. Their diets, often rich in carbohydrates from grains, bread, gruel, and lacking in sufficient dental care, contributed significantly to decay. Sugars, when available, were also highly destructive. Without understanding bacteria or plaque, the primary goal of their dental practices was often to remove visible food particles and to mask bad breath, rather than to prevent the insidious progression of decay or gum disease. The most basic tool for oral care was the chewing stick. These were small twigs or branches, often from aromatic or medicinal plants, whose ends were frayed by chewing to create a crude brush. People would chew on these sticks, using the fibrous end to rub and scrape food particles from their teeth. Various plants were chosen for their perceived benefits. Some had natural abrasive qualities, others possessed antiseptic properties, and many offered a refreshing taste or scent. Miswak sticks, derived from the Salvadora persica tree, were famously used across the Middle East and parts of Asia, prized for their cleaning and breath-freshening properties. In Europe, twigs from trees like miswak, neem, or even hazelnut might have been used. While primitive, regular use of chewing sticks could offer a basic level of mechanical cleaning, dislodging food debris and stimulating gums, providing a rudimentary form of oral hygiene that was better than nothing. Beyond mechanical cleaning, a variety of abrasive substances were employed as tooth powders or rubs. Charcoal, made from burnt wood, was a common choice. Its abrasive nature meant it could effectively scour stains from tooth surfaces, and its porous quality was thought to absorb impurities and odors. Ground crushed herbs were also widely utilized, often chosen for their strong scents or purported medicinal properties. Mint, rosemary, sage, and other aromatic plants would be dried, crushed into a fine powder, and then rubbed directly onto the teeth, sometimes with a finger, sometimes with a cloth or the chewing stick itself. These herbs offered a temporary masking of bad breath and some anecdotal cleansing. The effectiveness, however, was limited to superficial cleaning, doing little to address deeper issues like decay or gum disease. Perhaps the most surprising and ingenious, yet undoubtedly harsh, method was the use of burnt bread. A piece of stale bread would be charred until it was black and brittle, then crushed into a coarse powder. This pulverized burnt bread would then be rubbed vigorously onto the teeth. Like charcoal, it provided an abrasive texture that could scour away visible stains and food debris. The carbon content might have contributed to a temporary whitening effect, mimicking the action of modern charcoal toothpastes. However, the abrasive nature of burnt bread, if not finely powdered, could also damage tooth enamel, contributing to sensitivity and long-term wear. The combination of heat treatment and natural ingredients was a pragmatic, if crude, attempt to achieve oral cleanliness with readily available household materials, highlighting their resourcefulness in the face of limited options. The caveat, "and no, it didn't always work," is a crucial understatement. Despite their best efforts, pervasive tooth decay, gum disease, and abscesses were endemic in historical populations. Painful toothaches were a common affliction, leading to widespread tooth loss, often by early adulthood. Extractions, usually performed by barbers or blacksmiths with crude tools and no anesthesia, were brutal and terrifying experiences. The lack of understanding of bacterial infections meant that dental problems often escalated, leading to systemic infections that could be fatal. Bad breath was a pervasive reality, only temporarily masked by herbs or the occasional strong-smelling mouthwash like chamber lye, fermented urine, further highlighting the limitations of their hygiene practices. These dental realities profoundly affected daily life. Assassins, operating in this environment, faced unique challenges. Their already grim existence was exacerbated by chronic dental pain, which could compromise their ability to focus, endure hardship, or maintain stealth. Their unwashed bodies, hair, and clothes, all contributing to general unsanitary conditions, would include constant oral discomfort. They faced the chilling risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by dental infections. Their work was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Medieval cities were death traps, and hiding bodies was almost impossible. Plague made everything worse, and religion was a constant threat. The night wasn't their friend, and toilets were holes over rivers. Even the act of personal hygiene, including dental care, was a testament to enduring discomfort and desperate ingenuity. In conclusion, the gleaming smiles and fresh breath of modern dental care are profound luxuries. For vast stretches of history, dental hygiene was a primitive, challenging endeavor, relying on chewing sticks and, surprisingly, burnt bread. Crude abrasives like charcoal, crushed herbs, or even pulverized burnt bread were vigorously rubbed on teeth. And with a grim, knowing certainty, no, it didn't always work, leaving populations with widespread decay, pain, and tooth loss. This historical reality dramatically reshapes our understanding of personal care in the past, revealing a world where oral hygiene was a daily struggle, managed with ingenuity born of scarcity, and where the constant discomfort of dental problems was simply another pervasive hardship in a life already burdened by immense challenges. In the popular imagination, the medieval period is often synonymous with widespread squalor, a time when personal hygiene was rudimentary at best, and pervasive odors were simply an accepted part of daily life. Indeed, we've explored how common people and even royalty bathed infrequently, fearing disease from open pores, and relied on crude methods for cleaning clothes and teeth. Yet, within this generally unwashed landscape, an unexpected beacon of cleanliness emerges, challenging our assumptions. Monks were remarkably cleaner than most. Far from living in ascetic filth, monasteries had surprisingly strict routines, including regular hand-washing and communal bath days. This meticulous adherence to hygienic practices, often driven by a combination of practical necessity, spiritual symbolism, and the unique communal living arrangements, led to an intriguing paradox. Ironically, monks may have been the cleanest people of the time. Their dedication to order, both spiritual and physical, set them apart in a world largely indifferent to systematic cleanliness. The cleanliness of monasteries stemmed from several intersecting factors, often overlooked in the broader narrative of medieval hygiene. Firstly, monastic life was founded on strict routines and a profound sense of order. The rule of Saint Benedict, which governed much of Western monasticism, emphasized discipline, communal living, and the meticulous management of resources. This extended to the physical environment. Monasteries were often self-sufficient communities, requiring organized systems for cooking, brewing, farming, and caring for the sick. Such intricate communal living necessitated a degree of organization that naturally lent itself to better hygiene than the chaotic conditions of a peasant hovel or even a noble's less regulated castle. Waste management, while not modern, was often more systematized, with dedicated latrines, reredouters, often built over flowing water or cesspits, separated from living and eating areas, a significant improvement over common practices. Central to their hygienic practices was regular hand-washing. While the modern understanding of germ theory was centuries away, monks intuitively understood the importance of washing hands before meals and after using latrines. The communal nature of monastic life, with shared meals and close quarters, would have made them acutely aware of how illness could spread. The custom of lavabo, washing of hands, a ritual practiced by priests during the Mass, also had its counterpart in the monastic refectory, where monks would wash their hands before eating in a designated area. This daily ritual, performed multiple times a day, was far more frequent and consistent than the hand-washing practices of the general populace, offering a significant, albeit unscientific, defense against the spread of disease. This practice was deeply ingrained in their daily rhythm, a small but powerful act of physical purification preceding the spiritual nourishment of communal meals. Furthermore, monasteries often had designated bath days, a practice that sharply distinguished them from the prevailing societal norms. While lay people feared bathing due to the miasma theory, monastic institutions, particularly those in warmer climates or those with access to ample water, often built near rivers or springs, maintained communal bathing facilities. These might not have been as grand as Roman baths, but they provided a regular opportunity for full-body washing. The practice was often regulated, perhaps once a week or every few weeks, and might have been combined with rituals of spiritual purification. This regular, systematic washing of the body was highly unusual for the time, marking monks as distinctly cleaner. It reflected a monastic ideal of bodily purity as a reflection of spiritual purity, challenging the lay belief that cleanliness invited disease. Beyond personal washing, monastic communities also practiced a higher degree of environmental cleanliness. Monastic infirmaries, though primitive, aimed to provide structured care for the sick, often with dedicated washing facilities. The clothes of monks and nuns, while simple, were part of a regulated system of laundry, washed more frequently and thoroughly than the garments of the general population, removing dirt and parasites. Their bedding, too, would have been subject to more regular cleaning and airing, reducing infestations of lice and fleas, which were otherwise normal even for royalty. This systematic approach to hygiene, though not driven by germ theory, inadvertently made them less susceptible to the rampant diseases that plagued medieval society. Ironically, while the outside world feared open pores and miasma, the monastic commitment to order and cleanliness, however imperfectly understood in medical terms, likely contributed to better health outcomes for monks and nuns. Their controlled environments, regular routines, communal discipline, and focus on physical and spiritual purity inadvertently created conditions that were less conducive to the spread of infection than the average medieval village or castle. This made their communities, in effect, islands of relative hygiene in a vast sea of unsanitary conditions. These monastic practices stand in stark contrast to the realities of the wider world. Assassins, for instance, operated in a far less sanitary sphere. Their lives were already a brutal reality, often fearing dying from disease before even carrying out a job, a risk intensified by poor hygiene and ubiquitous pests like lice and fleas, which were normal even for royalty. Their work was made harder by superstitions, and their employers were untrustworthy. Medieval cities were death traps, and hiding bodies was almost impossible. Plague made everything worse, and religion was a constant threat, seeing them as demons and promising horrifying executions. The night wasn't their friend, and toilets were holes over rivers. Their very dental hygiene was primitive, and hair wasn't washed often. In a world where even bathing was feared, the structured cleanliness of the monastery was a silent revolution, a beacon of order in a chaotic, often unsanitary, age. In conclusion, the popular image of medieval filth is incomplete. Monks were, surprisingly, cleaner than most. Their monastic life, governed by strict routines that included regular hand-washing and communal bath days, set them apart. Paradoxically, this adherence to physical purity, often rooted in spiritual discipline rather than scientific understanding, meant that monks may have been the cleanest people of the time. Their monasteries served as islands of relative hygiene and order in a world largely grappling with unsanitary conditions, offering a fascinating glimpse into a different kind of medieval cleanliness, one driven by a profound commitment to structure and purity that inadvertently promoted better health in an otherwise challenging era. In the contemporary world, our understanding of hygiene is inextricably linked with health, comfort, and aesthetics. We meticulously wash our bodies, our clothes, and our environments with an array of products, all driven by the desire to be clean, smell fresh, and ward off unseen germs. This modern paradigm, however, is a profound luxury born of scientific discovery, advanced infrastructure, and industrial progress. When we cast our gaze back to the medieval period, we must consciously strip away our present-day assumptions and confront a stark, often uncomfortable, truth. Medieval hygiene wasn't really about cleanliness as we understand it today. It was fundamentally, brutally, about survival. Every decision, every crude practice, every improvised method employed was a desperate negotiation with disease, discomfort, and the ever-present specter of death, turning basic self-care into a grim, pragmatic art form where the primary goal was simply to live to see another day. People didn't live by modern standards of hygiene. Such concepts were alien, impossible, and often, paradoxically, deemed dangerous. Instead, they used what they had: herbs, ashes, perfumes, even urine, not to feel fresh, but to stay alive. In this perilous world, where every breath could carry contagion, cleanliness was more protection than presentation, a desperate, empirical strategy against an invisible, relentless enemy. Consider the prevailing, foundational beliefs that dictated their approach to the human body. The dominant medical theory of the era, the theory of the four humors, inherited from ancient Greek and Roman thought, posited that human health was a delicate, precarious balance of four internal fluids: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Illness was simply an imbalance of these humors. Within this framework, the skin was understood not as an impermeable barrier, but as a porous membrane, teeming with tiny, invisible openings, the pores, which were believed to be crucial pathways for the expulsion of harmful vapors and excess humors from within the body, a vital process for maintaining internal balance. This fundamental misunderstanding directly informed their profound apprehension surrounding extensive washing, especially with warm water. The widely accepted medical wisdom dictated that warm water would cause the body's pores to open excessively, dilating them beyond their natural, protective state. This opening was seen as a dangerous vulnerability. It was feared that these expanded pores would then act as unguarded gateways, allowing harmful external elements to penetrate the body's interior. Foremost among these dreaded elements was bad air, or miasma, the pervasive theory that diseases were caused by noxious, foul-smelling emanations rising from decaying matter, stagnant water, or generally unhygienic environments. If pores were opened by warm water, it was believed this invisible, disease-carrying bad air could easily enter the bloodstream, directly corrupting the humors and leading to illness, fever, or even death. This perception was so strong that choosing not to bathe frequently was not a sign of indifference to personal hygiene, but a logical act of self-preservation, a calculated risk reduction based on their most widely accepted understanding of health. Their cleanliness was thus less about removing visible dirt and more about maintaining an imagined internal equilibrium and protecting the body's perceived external, spiritual, and physical barriers. This fear profoundly shaped everything from the monarch's infrequent baths, even kings bathed only a few times a year, to the peasant's reliance on dry rubbing, a stark contrast to our germ-aware practices, driven by a desperate, constant negotiation with unseen threats. The very tools and substances available for personal care further underscore this desperate practicality. They didn't have soap the way we do, no industrially produced, gentle bars that lathered abundantly. Instead, soap was rare and harsh, a crude, highly alkaline substance often reserved for industrial processes like fulling wool or tanning leather, rather than for delicate skin. Consequently, most people just used what they had: water and sand, or even ashes. Water, when clean and accessible, was the primary agent, though often itself a source of contamination. Sand, readily available, served as a crude abrasive, physically scrubbing away grime, however irritatingly. Ashes, a ubiquitous byproduct of every fire, formed a weak lye when mixed with water, acting as a mild degreaser and abrasive cleanser for skin and hair. Even more startling, human pee, known as chamber lye, was widely used in laundry for its ammonia content, effectively cutting through grease. And astonishingly, It was even used for whitening teeth, its bleaching properties valued despite the obvious repulsiveness. These methods, while effective at removing visible dirt and odors to some extent, were often harsh, left strong residues, and did little to eliminate the microscopic pathogens that truly caused disease. Their choices were about finding anything that worked, not about modern comfort or sterility. Managing basic bodily functions also painted a grim picture of hygiene driven by survival. Toilets were often holes over rivers or rudimentary cesspits, even within grand castles, creating direct pathways for contamination. As for post-toilet care, toilet paper was an alien concept. Instead, people had to try wool, hay, or a gooseneck. For the wealthy, soft cloth might be a luxury, but for the vast majority, it was leaves, or tragically, nothing at all. These profoundly unsanitary practices meant that fecal matter, a prime vector for bacteria and parasites, was rarely effectively removed, directly contributing to rampant infections like dysentery and typhoid. The prevalence of lice and fleas was normal, even for royalty. Everyone had them, forcing a constant irritating battle with these pervasive pests using lice combs and the desperate measure of burning bedding. Hair wasn't washed often but oiled and powdered, primarily to deter bugs and mask odor, rather than to cleanse. These were not choices for aesthetic appeal or personal comfort. They were daily engagements with pervasive problems, measures taken to reduce immediate suffering, manage infestations, and minimize, however crudely, the spread of illness in a world without scientific understanding. The ultimate truth of medieval hygiene becomes chillingly clear when viewed through the lens of external, unrelenting threats. Cities were literal death traps. Their tight alleys, vigilant watchmen, and nosy drunks meant constant vigilance, for every shadow might be a snitch. An assassin, trying to blend in, faced these urban perils daily. The night wasn't your friend, swarming with criminals and wild dogs. Water sources were profoundly polluted, forcing people to drink weak, small beer every day, even kids, as a safer alternative. The risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job was omnipresent. Plague made everything worse, offering a cynical cover but a terrifying personal risk. Hiding bodies was almost impossible, with no clean-up crews or chemicals. Superstitions made their work harder, instilling paralyzing fears. And their employers were untrustworthy, likely to have them killed after a task. Religion was a constant threat, viewing them as demons. All these layers of peril meant they lived in constant anxiety, waiting for death to find them, knowing that getting caught was a fate worse than death. In this relentless landscape, hygiene was never a pursuit of freshness or a reflection of social refinement. It was a crude, desperate strategy to simply stay alive. The medieval person's understanding of health drove them to avoid practices we deem essential, to tolerate body odor, and to use materials that would horrify us. Their practices were an intuitive, empirical response to the overwhelming challenges of their environment, a constant, often losing, battle against an invisible enemy they couldn't comprehend. Every act related to cleanliness was a pragmatic decision in a world where survival was the only true measure of success. The very existence of assassins, living on the perilous edge, constantly confronting filth, disease, and death, underscores this ultimate reality. They embody the medieval dilemma, not how to achieve modern cleanliness, but how to simply be, to draw another breath, to make it through another night, using every crude tool at their disposal to cheat death just one more time. After delving into the stark, often uncomfortable realities of medieval life, a world of limited resources, pervasive disease, and a constant struggle for survival where hygiene was a matter of life and death, not merely freshness, it's easy to view their practices with a modern sense of revulsion or superiority. We might recoil at the thought of using stale urine for laundry or the acrid smell of burning bones for warmth. Yet, to dismiss their ways as simply unclean is to profoundly misunderstand the ingenuity, resilience, and fundamental humanity that underscored their every action. The truth is that their methods, while they may seem strange to us now, were deeply human. Every single ritual, every carefully chosen scent, every ingrained habit was not merely a reaction to external circumstance, but a profound, often desperate, way to hold on to dignity and comfort in a world full of chaos. Whether it was the meticulous use of lice combs or the delicate application of rosewater, every practice, no matter how humble or how luxurious, ultimately stemmed from a universal, shared desire for peace, for beauty, and for belonging. Consider the context. Medieval people lived in a world where disease was a constant, terrifying enigma, attributed to bad air, miasma, an imbalance of the four humors or malevolent spirits. Their medical understanding was rudimentary, their technologies limited. In this reality, their hygiene practices, which we might find crude, were their best attempt at protection. Not bathing often, for instance, wasn't laziness. It was a perceived act of self-preservation, based on the belief that warm water opened pores to harmful miasma. This was a profound, if mistaken, effort to safeguard their health, an attempt to assert some control over their vulnerable bodies in a chaotic and unpredictable world. The very act of choosing a method, however uncomfortable, was an assertion of agency, a small victory against helplessness. Even their most basic and seemingly unpleasant cleaning methods, like using ashes or sand with water, or even fermented urine, chamber lye, for laundry and teeth, were born of a deep resourcefulness. They didn't have our soaps, our cleansers, our advanced chemistry. They used what was readily available and empirically effective. This wasn't about feeling fresh in our contemporary sense. It was about preventing garments from becoming so encrusted with grime they harbored disease, or about maintaining teeth enough to eat the meager food available. There was dignity in managing one's affairs, in making do with what one had, in maintaining a semblance of order and care in a disorderly world. The very effort involved in these crude methods highlights their persistent, quiet struggle for a form of cleanliness, a desire to mitigate the pervasive filth of their environment, even if they never achieved modern sterility. The ubiquity of lice combs further exemplifies this desperate yet deeply human pursuit of comfort and dignity. The presence of lice and fleas was normal, even for royalty, an inescapable reality of life across all social strata. The constant itching, the visible parasites, these were profoundly uncomfortable and demeaning. The daily ritual of using a fine-toothed comb was a direct, persistent battle against this irritation. It was an act of personal maintenance, a small rebellion against the relentless discomfort, an attempt to reclaim a modicum of physical peace. For a mother to comb her child's hair, painstakingly removing nits, was an act of love, a tangible expression of care in a world where children were constantly vulnerable. This struggle, seemingly insignificant to us, was a daily testament to their desire for comfort, for freedom from persistent irritation, and for a simple sense of personal well-being that was constantly under assault. And then there were the scents, the perfumes and herbs like lavender and rosemary, or even vinegar. These were the medieval deodorants, used not to eliminate body odor at its source, a concept they didn't grasp, but to mask it, to create a more pleasant olfactory environment. This wasn't merely vanity, it was a profound act of social grace and personal dignity. To present oneself with a pleasing scent, however fleeting, was a way to navigate social interactions, to convey respect to others, and to carve out a personal space that felt less oppressive, less defined by the pervasive odors of a pre-sanitized world. For the wealthy, exotic perfumes were a clear marker of status. But even for commoners, a sprig of rosemary tucked into clothing, or a quick rub with a fragrant herb, was a small gesture towards personal pleasantness. These scents were acts of defiance against the overwhelming unpleasantness of their environment, a sensory plea for beauty in a world often devoid of it, a quiet assertion of the right to feel, however briefly, elevated above the squalor. Even the rituals around life's darker moments, the public spectacles of punishment where assassins were publicly tortured, maimed, or dismembered, were not just about state power. They were rituals of a kind, designed to impart a lesson, to define boundaries, to reassert a perceived social order, however brutal. And the profound silence with which they faced death, the quiet understanding of their precarious existence, the way they slept with courage on hard, frozen mud, these were not marks of dull resignation but of an immense inner strength, a fortitude born of generations of endurance, reflecting a deep, collective belonging to a lineage of survivors. Their lives, whether lived in the chaotic, dangerous streets of medieval cities, which were death traps, battling constant threats from criminals, wild dogs, and watchmen where every shadow might be a snitch, or confronting the chilling reality of plague that made everything worse, were a testament to this inherent humanity. They navigated a world where toilet paper was non-existent and toilets were holes over rivers, where water sources were polluted, forcing them to drink weak, small beer. They faced ruthless employers who were untrustworthy and constant threats from religion and superstitions that made their work harder. Yet, through all this, every conscious effort, every small daily habit, every desperate choice, was a testament to their enduring pursuit of basic human needs. To find peace from the endless anxieties, to create pockets of beauty in a grim reality, and to forge a sense of belonging within their families and communities, even when constantly threatened by forces beyond their control. Their methods, however strange to us, were the threads they wove to hold on to their dignity, their comfort, and their very humanity in a chaotic, unforgiving world. In the relentless rush of our modern lives, amidst the countless demands on our time and attention, it is incredibly easy to fall into a state of unconscious privilege. We navigate our days with an almost effortless ease, surrounded by conveniences that have become so utterly commonplace they are invisible. Yet, if we pause, truly pause, and cast our minds back through the corridors of history, a profound realization emerges. Today, we're lucky, incredibly, astonishingly lucky, and we often, far too often, forget it. The very fabric of our daily existence, woven with threads of comfort and hygiene, would have been considered miraculous, unimaginable luxuries to the vast majority of humanity who came before us. Simple acts like stepping into a hot shower, wielding a toothbrush, lathering with fragrant shampoo, or wrapping ourselves in clean towels are not just conveniences. They're an integral, almost subconscious, part of our routine. But to the people of the past, to the peasants, the artisans, even the kings and queens of medieval times, these were not routines, they were unattainable dreams. And sometimes, paradoxically, remembering those dreams, truly grasping the profound absence of such comforts in their lives, helps us appreciate the astonishing comfort we live in now, imbuing our daily rituals with a newfound sense of gratitude. Consider the hot shower, that daily cascade of steaming water that effortlessly washes away the grime and tension of the day. For medieval people, the concept was fantastical. Their reality involved infrequent, cold, and often public washings, dictated by the fear that warm water opened pores to disease-carrying miasma. Heating enough water for even a small bath was an immense logistical challenge, consuming precious firewood and labor. The idea of water arriving instantly, perfectly heated, at the turn of a knob, would have been a miracle beyond comprehension, a technology seemingly wielded by gods. Their experience of personal cleansing was often limited to dry rubbing, wiping with damp cloths, or using abrasive materials like sand or ashes. The profound, pervasive chill that permeated their homes, where the very air froze their breath, would have made the thought of a continuous stream of warmth a yearning beyond words, a dream of ultimate physical comfort, a complete sanctuary from the biting cold that defined their existence. Then there is the toothbrush, that humble instrument of daily oral hygiene. We reach for it without thought, along with our fluoridated toothpaste, expecting clean teeth, fresh breath, and lifelong dental health. But for the people of the past, dental hygiene was a brutal, often losing battle against decay and discomfort. Their tools were crude: chewing sticks, harsh abrasives like charcoal or crushed herbs, or astonishingly, burnt bread rubbed on teeth. These methods were rudimentary at best, doing little to prevent the rampant tooth decay, abscesses, and widespread tooth loss that plagued populations from childhood. The luxury of a soft bristled brush gently cleaning away invisible plaque, preventing pain before it even began, would have been a dream of unimaginable relief. They endured chronic dental pain, a constant, nagging torment that we are largely spared, a silent testament to the efficacy of our modern, effortless oral care routine. And shampoo, that fragrant lathering liquid that leaves our hair feeling light, clean, and fresh. For people in the past, the concept of hair washing as we know it was largely absent. Hair wasn't washed often, it was primarily oiled and powdered. These practices, using animal fats or vegetable oils to manage hair and, crucially, to keep bugs away, along with scented powders to mask odors, were their only hair care. Lice and fleas were not an aberration but a constant, irritating reality. Normal, even for royalty. The thought of hair being truly clean, free of grease, dirt, and parasites, would have been a profound dream of freedom from perpetual itching and discomfort, a sensory luxury utterly alien to their experience. Their daily battle against infestation was a testament to the sheer ingenuity required to mitigate, not eliminate, the pervasive presence of these tiny tormentors. And finally, the simple luxury of clean towels. After a modern shower, we reach for a soft, absorbent towel, laundered and fresh, that effortlessly dries our skin. For medieval people, such a luxury was rare. Clothes were often rough, rarely washed with true soap, which was rare and harsh, and more commonly cleaned with water and sand, or even ashes. Human pee, or chamber lye, was used in laundry, leaving a pervasive, distinct odor even if dirt was removed. The sheer labor involved in washing even basic garments meant that linen, while changed more frequently by the wealthy, was still a precious commodity, not a disposable item for comfort. The idea of a soft, fresh, and absorbent towel, ready at hand, would have been a dream of exquisite, unattainable comfort, a testament to a level of cleanliness and ease that defied their daily struggles. These modern routines are more than just conveniences. They are profound indicators of how much has changed. The people of the past lived in a world where medieval hygiene wasn't really about cleanliness, it was about survival. Their use of herbs, ashes, perfumes, and even urine was not to feel fresh, but to stay alive, making cleanliness a form of protection against disease rather than presentation. Their sanitation was rudimentary. Toilets were holes over rivers, and toilet paper was non-existent, forcing reliance on crude materials like wool, hay, or even a gooseneck. Their very environment was hostile. Cities were death traps, teeming with criminals, wild dogs, and vigilant guards. The night wasn't your friend, and bodies were hard to hide. Life was short, brutish, and filled with dangers ranging from plague that made everything worse, to superstitions that haunted their minds, to untrustworthy employers and the constant threat of religion. They faced the constant risk of dying from disease before even carrying out a job, and for an assassin, getting caught was a fate worse than death. So, as we turn on our taps, as we pick up our toothbrushes, as we reach for our shampoos and fresh towels, let us take a moment to truly appreciate the astonishing comfort and safety that defines our lives. These seemingly mundane routines are, in fact, the realization of dreams that generations before us could only yearn for. Sometimes, remembering those dreams helps us appreciate the comfort we live in now, fostering a profound sense of gratitude for the advancements that have transformed the very fabric of our daily existence from a relentless struggle for survival into a life of ease, hygiene, and unparalleled well-being.